the definition of unprocessed milk was expanded to include pasteurized and sterilized milk. But we also see that other products, including maize flour, even though it was exempted, we actually saw a marginal increase in price between August and September. As we also saw, as expected, electricity, the VAT previously was 12%, and now moved to 16%. And also, we also see that there's also a marginal increase. So what effect did this have? So we set out and talked to a few low-income households. And for these income households, we realized that the expenditure, the amount of money of the proportion of income that they spend on food actually increased by between 7 to 10%. And this is only in the first month. Mainly, this is because unscrupulous traders took advantage and increased prices on commodities that were even exempt. And it's difficult, for example, for KRA to net this because these consumers, they're not even registered and they're not supposed to be charging VAT because they do not meet the threshold of 5 million shillings turnover. So our focus for this meeting actually is to look at what effect implementing the VAT Act 2013 had on the agricultural sector. So as we mentioned earlier, for the crops, actually there was no direct effect because inputs such as fertilizer, seeds, pesticides, they were exempt from VAT. But for the livestock subsector, we realized that animal feeds were moved from the zero-rated category to the taxable category. And livestock, this subsector is important because it generates 40% of agricultural GDP and actually generates 12% to the national GDP. So poultry is a major component of the livestock sector. And one of the reasons why we focus on poultry is because of one, it is very easy to start, especially by the rural and peri-urban households. It also, currently we're estimating that there are over 10 million commercial layers and over 6 million broilers. And this is just the commercial part. The indigenous chicken usually make up for the largest proportion, around 76% of the poultry that we have. But for purposes of the animal feeds, we focus on commercial layers and broilers. A large portion of the population in the rural and peri-urban areas actually depend on poultry farming for their livelihoods. And this is in terms of both nutrition and incomes. So as you mentioned earlier, it's also very easy to start. And it requires relatively, compared to other livestock enterprises, it requires relatively little technical know-how. And it's also cheaper compared to, for example, to dairy and the others. So to do this, we did 2 focus group discussions in Kiambu County. We also held additional interviews with farmers who are not part of the focus group discussion. These are poultry farmers. We also went out and talked to animal feed manufacturers and stockists so that we could follow the chain and see how the price was building up. So the effects, for example, as I'm showing for crops, you realize that for seed, fertilizer, and chemicals, we actually did not see a change, especially as a result of VAT. And as you can see, in fact, for fertilizer, because of the subsidized fertilizer that is coming in, the price actually went down. But this scenario is different for the livestock. So to start with, I presenting a table that shows our discussions with 2 feed manufacturers. And we are showing some selected animal feeds. And as you can see, we have, as you can see in this column, this is the price that was there before. Then this is the price now after the VAT. And then this is the percentage change. So what you realize is that in the case of manufacturer A, there is a consistent 16% increase. And for the manufacturer B, this increase is slightly higher. So the key difference is that for manufacturer A, most of his raw materials, he gets them from the region. That is Uganda and Tanzania. So for maize jam, wheat jam, pollen, there's still no VAT for products that are coming from those countries. But for manufacturer B, he uses locally, local raw materials. So for him, he has to pay VAT on inputs. And another thing that I would like you to see is that what happens is actually a uniform rate that is applied on the pre-VAT prices. And actually, that would be a very good justification for asking the government to waiver. But currently, the evidence we have, even though we are saying the evidence we have is pointing that we are actually losing more than we are gaining as a result of taxing the animal feeds. So quantifying it probably would be the next step that we need to do. Thank you very much.
Now, this is maize that we're talking about. It's a good crop to demonstrate the various effects on government policy. And so we find that during bad years, for example, between 2008 and 2009 and 10, we find that the imports do shoot up. We are interested in that because, and you will see why that is important as we go along. And so the government, as I've indicated, supplements domestic production with imports from the regional or international markets. Because of climate change, and which has added effects, variable rainfall, floods, droughts, pests and diseases, degraded soils, now we find ourselves with the challenge of whether we can match the increase in population, match the consumption currently, but also match the increase in population, the demand that comes with the increase in population. From what we have read, and the little that we know from being policy analysts, but the others who know a lot about biotechnology, but what we have seen is that it offers potential solutions to the constraints that are facing the agricultural sector, the food and agriculture sector. In addition to increasing supply, we are also, and being able to, having the technology that being able to withstand changes that come with climate change, what we read is that also it can also provide a solution where nutrition is concerned. Yeah? And even declining soil fertility, that this biotechnology offers those solutions. And that GM then will be able to help us break through the ceiling that is currently there, where we find our production just stagnating at a certain level. We can be able to break through that. And therefore ease the pressure on food prices. Yeah? In spite of these challenges, what we have observed and what we have read is that the government's approach, although we have seen some leadership, and you will see from my presentation, we also have seen that the government has approached the issue with caution, more guarded, but also a lot of leadership, as many of those in this area will tell you. If you look at the whole world, for example, you'll see that there are many countries that are embracing GMO crops, and this map just shows the hectareage that is under GM crops in the world. Most of it being in the Americas, the United States, the southern part in Brazil and in Argentina, some in Canada. We also see South Africa and Eastern China and other countries in India, and less so in Europe, but to some extent embracing it, but more cautiously. But in Africa, we see it is in South Africa and Burkina Faso and a little bit of Egypt. You can see our region there, nothing marked there. We are still chewing on this information, thinking about it, but you will see from my presentation that we have had some breakthroughs. This chart just shows the increase in what has happened since 1996, when we understand the first area acreage was planted under GMO. We have seen from that there's been a rapid, gradual but increasing acreage under GMO crops. This is the developed world, and this is the developing countries. And what we are reading is that now we see a faster increase from developing countries. But in addition to the increase, we also have seen that there are also other countries that have a ban on GMO crops. It's not only our country, but we see, for example, in Americas, within the United States, you have states that also have different views on GMOs, and all along, Europe is a bit more conservative in as far as GMOs is concerned. But that just shows that the world is not unified in as far as this area is concerned. Now, our objectives as we got into this, into this, and you will notice that this is the first time that Tegemeo may be talking about GMOs, but we got interested because of the ban on GMO imports, food and products. We got interested because we realized that Kenya does import, and it is also a transit country for relief food. So we got interested in knowing what is going to be the effect of this on food and food security. But in addition to that, we wouldn't just look at the ban, so we realized we have to review the policies and the legislation, and also probably from that, talk to key stakeholders and see how that is going to impact. Yeah? So it is a rapid assessment from reviewing secondary information, but also talking to key informants. Now, according to the Constitution, now from the food security perspective, the government is committed to ensuring there's adequate food for all people in sufficient quantities all the time. This is reiterated again in the food and nutrition security policy, while on the same time, the Vision 2030 recognizes the role of science and technology playing a central role in boosting the economic growth and wealth creation and competitiveness. So these two are coming into play in this area of when you look at GMO, these are the things that come into your mind. Now, in as far as food is concerned, we said we produce our own, and we import, and we also try to caution farmers from high food prices. The agricultural sector, when we look at the agricultural sector, the document that we refer to that is implementing this commitment by the government is the ASDS, the Agricultural Sector Development Strategy. And we see that it recognizes the role of biotechnology in securing Kenya's food security. Yeah? But on the other hand, when we look at the food and nutrition security policy, when we read through, we see that it is silent. It is completely silent in as far as the role of biotechnology. And so you can see a gap there, just a gap in terms of how we view this thing. The GMO, the policy on GMOs has evolved over a long time. Preparations for entry of GMOs began in as early as 1980s through the National Council for Science Technology being the designated authority at that time. And we have seen various twists and turns since then. You know, it was this authority was the one competent in the 1980s. It was seen as the one competent to deal with that, and then, but it was not until 15 years later, in 1995, that the council initiated the process of developing the national biosafety guidelines and regulations. But since then, as you read, you will see we have found that there's been various policy advances. For example, the biotechnology development policy is already done. We find we have a biosafety bill, a biosafety act, but also we also read and found that there were many strategic delays and policy reversals, whether strategic or tactical, to alleviate a fear at a certain point. We found delays and reversals. For example, we find in 2004, there was a private member's bill barring introduction of GM food in Kenya. In 2012, just last year, over a year ago, we found that there was a ban on GM foods. But there's also been contradictions in the policy. For example, in 2011, the government responding to a crisis in food by looking the other way, not really fussing whether food was GM or not. So we do find that there's been all those going on. The new seed policy of 2012 identifies biotechnology as a pillar of food security. Yeah? However, we also find that we are still in confined experiments with GMOs. We still don't have anything out there in terms of commercialization of GMs. succeed, in spite of what technologies are there and promising. The people from the research organizations will tell you that. Kenya was the first in the region to sign the Cartagena Protocol, which is the one that dictates how the country, the protocols for GMO. It is the one that defines those, and we ratified that in 2003. But in 2004, we found that that is the time we got conflicting statements and actions from the government in as far as GMOs are concerned. We have several, the president putting his weight behind modern methods. The president then, that was in 2004. The minister saying that, there's possibly going to be a green light, but in another incident being cautious against GM foods, and a private member's bill that was introduced then. I just want to say that since 2006, 2007, and 2008, we made quite a lot of progress, and Kenya at that point seems to be embracing GMOs in the agricultural sector. We got the National Biosafety Development Policy approved by Parliament. We got some increased funding for biotechnology, and the Biosafety Bill was even published then. And between that time and 2011, we have seen Kenya being more receptive, the launching of the Biosafety Awareness Strategy, enactment of the Biosafety Act, and the National Bioethics Committee to play an advisory role, and many positive statements from senior government officials reinforcing the positive attitude towards biotechnology. Yeah. In 2011, actually, we got regulations for imports and exports, and also we had the regulation on labeling. That was the last one in 2011. However, several months later, in November, the government banned the importation of foods, GMO foods and products. And the reason for that is that there is inadequate evidence or research on the safety of these foods, and then also that the Ministry of Health, this came from the Ministry of Health, and we will see that. That was just, I thought it was good because I didn't have a presentation showing what exactly has gone on, but that is how it has evolved. Now, when we look at the regulatory framework for the GMOs, just to give a background before I go to the challenges that the country may be facing because of this situation, we have international treaties which dictate what we do or guide on what we can do and what we cannot do, but we also have national institutions and stakeholder forum also therein. These are the international treaties that guide or dictate how we relate to GMO foods and products and biotechnology. In the national coordination structure for GMOs, we find that now we have a National Biosafety Authority, the NBA, established by that Act of 2009, and it oversees and supervises, and it also regulates research, commercial activities, ensuring safety, from of humans and livestock, but also protecting the environment from use of this biotechnology and GMOs. It is entrusted also with approval or otherwise of products that are entering the country or are on transit. Yeah, and you see here the NBA, working closely with other organizations like KEFIS, KIPI, KEBS, the NEMA, the Public Health, and others like AWS and DVC. All those have their role. But NBA in consultation consults them depending on what we are dealing with at any one point. And that is what we read. So it's a broad-based, multi-stakeholder entity. That's what we read, and it has representation from all those bodies that we see indicated there. Now, there are a few issues as analysts that we noted as we read through. One is that there are conflicting interests in this regulatory framework. When we read and talked to key stakeholders, what came out is that there are possibilities of finding conflicts of interest and also the capacity of Kenya biosafety institutions with regard to, promoting the role as a promoter